taking time from your hacks to come and join us. I'm very excited to be joined by Arwa Tizani, who's going to give you a bit of an overview about her kind of career and from the underground to space. So Arwa, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you're kind of mid-stress. You're halfway through the hack, so I really appreciate you joining me today. Like Alex said, my name is Arwa Tizani, and my goal today is to kind of share with you the experiences that I had during my career to hopefully help guide you through some of the challenges that you may face throughout your career path. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself quickly. Um, my educational background is that I have a bachelor's degree in civil and structural engineering, and a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. Some of my more prominent roles in my career have been a lead civil engineer at the Boring Company, which is Elon Musk's tunneling company, a director of the Hyperloop competitions, a director of the Not a Boring competition, and I'm currently a project manager at Relativity Space, which I'll go into shortly. The picture that you see there on the right is from many years ago. That is within the Hyperloop tube, which I'll go into later on in this presentation. But one of my proudest accomplishments is what you see in that photo. So I kind of wanted to go into how I got into such a diverse career path. So the question I get all the time is, how did you start off being a civil engineer and then get involved with Hyperloop and then get involved with tunneling and then now get involved with the rocket industry? And the thing that I always tell people is you have to know your own values and your own priorities. And the values that I had are listed here. So I had a very big fascination with innovation. I always wanted to work in R&D. I always wanted to develop something new. I always wanted to help engineer the new thing. What are we doing now? How can we think outside the box? How can we design this in a different way? How can we gain time? How can we eliminate the complexity of different things? That's what really fascinated me. And that's what I knew I wanted to go into within my career as well, because that's what excited me. I also have willingness to learn, a big willingness to learn. So I always want to know what the people around me are doing. Whenever I see somebody that I look up to, whether it's at work or in my personal life, I always want to sit down with them. I always want to pick their brain. I always want to learn how they got into what they're doing currently and how they solve their problems, how they approach these different issues, and then get into the technical background, get into the actual process that they go through, get into the design. So that was a huge, huge point for me as well going into my career. Third is my curiosity. Whenever I see something out in the world every day and I see a problem behind it, I'm always curious to learn more. Why is there so much traffic on the road? What can make it better? What are the different ideas that went into this? How can we improve this? So everywhere I go, I'm always curious, not just to learn more about how to solve the problem, but to learn more about the problem itself, even if it's not in my direct industry or my career necessarily. I always want to learn more about it. Lastly is a desire to make an impact in the field of engineering specifically. So obviously I come from a big engineering background. Both my parents are actually engineers as well. And so going into this, I knew I didn't want necessarily to have a job that's like an 8 to 5, go into work, complete your tasks, go home kind of job. I'm not a huge work-life balance person. When I'm passionate about something, I put my 100% into it. And I am very passionate about what I do. And therefore, I want to know that I've made an impact in my field, I've made an impact in my career, and I've helped create value for my team. And that's what also helped push my career into these several paths, which again, I'll go into later on in this presentation. So I'll also go into the challenges that I faced along the way. I'm going to go into three big ones. Number one is time management, which I bet what I'm going to tell you is going to be a little bit controversial. Overcoming bad management in terms of work, school, whatever it may be, different ways to look at it and how to solve it. And then a big one, which I expect many of you face in your career and even in school, is gender-based bias. Where it comes from, how it's looking now, how you can overcome it, and not really have it affect what you do on a day-to-day basis. So to start with, I'll go through my career timeline. So this is, again, the SpaceX Hyperloop competition. This competition was based on Elon Musk's white paper that he wrote in, I believe it's now almost 10 years ago, actually. The concept is about this high-speed transportation system with the capability of going up to 760 miles an hour, completely frictionless, levitated within a completely vacuum pressurized tube that's able to allow passengers to travel from one place to the other, long distances along a straight path at over 760 miles an hour. An example was given of going from Los Angeles to San Francisco in under 30 minutes for my United States participants here. So the idea is to be able to traverse extremely long distances that you would normally have to traverse using an airplane, using this Hyperloop, where you can just go to another city that you normally have to fly to just have lunch. Travel there in 30 minutes, have lunch, do whatever you need to do, attend a meeting, and come back. And from that idea, this competition was born. So Elon, SpaceX, and the Boring Company actually worked on this competition, invited students from all over the world, invited engineering students essentially to design, prototype, and build their own Hyperloop pods at half scale to be able to traverse the tube, which you see in the right photo there with the SpaceX logo on it. This tube is about a mile long. It's located in California, and teams had to build their pod to compete in that tube after going through numerous tests throughout a week-long process and get safety approvals to make sure that their pod is safe and ready to go, make sure all of the hazardous materials were taken care of, and then they were okay to run. As you can imagine, hundreds, if not thousands, of applications were received. From there, they were counted down, they were graded, they were reviewed, and then a select number of teams were invited to compete in that process. And this competition continued for several years. The picture that you see on the left is one of the winning teams from the past several years. That is the Technical University of Munich in Germany. You see my happy face there in the middle. During a successful run, their team was able to go incrementally faster over the several years that we did this competition, with the latest being, I believe, nearly 400 miles an hour, which, if you can imagine, in a mile-long tube, you're accelerating, going up to 400 miles an hour, coasting for a short period of time, and then decelerating back to zero in order to brake safely without breaking or crashing into the end of the tube is a very, very difficult engineering problem. So that is the background of the Hyperloop competition. When I first found out about it, I, of course, was still in school. I was a civil engineer. And I heard about it through a friend, and I thought, hey, wait a minute, that sounds really interesting. I'm not a mechanical engineer, I'm not a software engineer, but I want to be able to participate. I want to help. This sounds like an amazing opportunity, and I want to be able to learn about it more because it's an incredible, innovative concept. And so I went in, interviewed, and they asked me if I was willing to learn the ANSYS software in order to do simulations for the team. I, of course, said yes, and joined the team in the beginning as a simulation engineer. Now, here's how I kind of changed my path within that team. I didn't stay a simulations engineer because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to go into more fields than just that within that competition. And one day we were in a meeting and they said, hey, we really need to raise money. It's time now where we need to start building our prototypes. We need to start testing. We need to start actually manufacturing the pod. And so we need to raise money and get sponsorships for this project. However, in order to do that, we need a marketing manager. We need somebody to go out to do presentations to sponsors, to manage social media, to create posts, to do stuff like that. Of course, nobody wanted to do it, and I didn't have that much time, but I saw an opportunity and I took it. And that's what ultimately led me to the path that I'm on today, was just that one small move that nobody wanted to do. I said yes, became a marketing manager. Through that, I also got to know a lot of people from the team. We were a team of about 60 engineers. And when it came time to start building the pod, which came very quickly, I became just a manufacturing engineer on the team, helped build the pod wherever I could, came to the lab whenever I could, and just stayed with the team and helped manufacture as many parts of the pod that I possibly could in that time. From there, the following year, I had kind of shown my colors to my teammates, and I had shown my colors to our professor, who was our advisor from the university, as well as our sponsors. And so our advisor had then had a meeting with me where he told me that he has chosen me to be the next team captain / chief engineer of the team for the following year. That was, of course, a big point for me. I was a civil engineer that was about to become a team captain of essentially a mechanical engineering project. So I was very excited, to say the least, but I was definitely met with some challenges, namely teammates who hadn't worked with me before, teammates that were working on completely different parts of the project, that hadn't worked with me directly, that hadn't really known my background, etc. I kind of walked into the announcement meeting with some of the faces being confused, like, who is this person? Why is she becoming a team captain of our team? She doesn't look like she knows anything. She barely looks like an engineer, was one of the comments that I received, believe it or not. And those were people that just didn't know me. So even though that was a very emotional time, I learned a lot from that moment. And so I decided to nip it in the bud. Directly after the meeting, I messaged those individuals. I told them, you know what? I know that you are not familiar with my background. You're not familiar with my experience. And I would love to sit down and talk to you, get your feedback, and show you what I can do so that you can provide me that opportunity and allow me to help lead this amazing team. And that's what I did. So that was one of the first major experiences that I had where people kind of judged me before knowing what I could do or having worked with me. It ended well. The year that I was team captain, my team actually succeeded. And for the only time in our team's history, we successfully had a Hyperloop run in the Hyperloop tube in Hawthorne, in the unpressurized tube. So it was not under vacuum at that point. But we had a successful run for the first time. So that's where that first picture came from. And it was, needless to say, one of the happiest moments of my life. And that's how this all started, because from that competition, I was actually recruited into the Boring Company. And the way that that happened was, again, I have a willingness to learn and I'm very curious. So during the competition, towards the end of the competition, the Boring Company invited teams to come do a tour of both SpaceX and the Boring Company, actually. And during one of those tours, I was just curious. So I would ask a lot of questions. And it turns out those questions were really good, because it was because of those questions and my experience at the competition that I was recruited to become the first and only civil engineer at the Boring Company for the next several years. And from there became one of the directors of the Hyperloop competition. So now for the next several competitions, I wasn't on the student side anymore. I was on the judging side and the leadership side, which I got to meet a lot of amazing engineers through. I got to learn a lot through, and it was just a truly rewarding experience. And so from there, I kind of realized that I didn't just want to be into civil engineering. I wanted to learn more skills. I wanted to add to my skill set and add to my own value. And I was interested in mechanical engineering. So I thought, okay, how about I just get my master's in mechanical and aerospace engineering? This was a difficult task, to say the least, mainly because most schools don't accept for you to do a postgraduate degree in a field that you did not get your undergraduate degree in. Engineering being one of the more difficult ones. However, because I did Hyperloop at my school, because I was able to meet my professors, the professors in the mechanical engineering school, and namely the dean of engineering, I knew that they had experience with what I did. They were aware of my accomplishments at the school, and they were willing to give me that chance. And it was through that that I was able to get a spot to get a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And now that has become a very valuable part of my resume and my skill set. Now, not only do I have the background to do the civil engineering part of the job, but I have just a little bit of a background to be able to learn about the opposite side, the mechanical engineering side, and everything that I do, which I'm very interested in, right? So at Hyperloop, it was very obvious mechanical engineering was most of the project. You're building a high-speed vehicle, essentially. So mechanical engineering, software engineering was very, very key, electrical engineering, etc. At the Boring Company, you have autonomous vehicles going in tunnels in between different destinations. So you have the added complexity of the autonomous vehicles in these tunnels and the different properties of that and how it relates to the infrastructure in that field, which was obviously also very valuable. Now in my current job at Relativity Space, it's a rocket company. So obviously mechanical engineering comes in very valuable as well. And it was because of that that I now have the background to be able to pick the brains of the brilliant minds around me and to be able to learn from them about the different things that they do, the different processes that happen, and how to be able to better contribute to that mission. So again, very valuable ad, and I highly recommend going out of your comfort zone, seeing what you value, what you want to learn. It's never too late to add to your skill set. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean go out and get another degree. For me at the time, it was just what I felt I needed to do to get that kind of base knowledge in order to continue in the career path that I wanted to. But that means if you need to take, specific classes, if you need to go on YouTube and learn a bunch of things that you wanted to learn, if you want to do more hackathons, more competitions, you need to just be able to always learn and add to your skill set in order to increase your value in the field that you want to go into. So I can't stress how valuable that is and how much that will add to your career. Now going into my career timeline at the Boring Company, I started out very early. I started out as employee number 14, as the civil engineer of the company. I was the only civil engineer for years and years and years. I was there for almost 4 years, I think. And I learned a lot from my experience there. Like I said, it was a startup. Not only was it a startup, it was an Elon Musk company, right? So you have high expectations, you have very fast-paced timelines, and you have innovation built throughout. The top skill sets that I learned from this are the 4 that you see listed in front of you. So the first one being adaptation. Projects always change. Priorities always change. your skill set has to be able to adapt to that change. Your timeline has to be able to adapt to that change. Your priorities have to be able to adapt to that change. So it's so important to be able to not get stuck in what you're doing, not say, hey, I've made progress from here to here, therefore I cannot go back and start again. You need to be able to say, I've made progress, I've learned this along the way. However, my priorities have changed, my direction has shifted. I need to be able to go back to ground zero and see how I can progress the same amount in less time, but to be able to adapt to that new goal. And that is so incredibly important when it comes to, especially a startup environment, but also an environment where you're constantly trying to do R&D, trying to develop new products, new designs, new programs, etc. The second skill set is scrappiness. So it's not always that you need to find the most expensive way to do something because it's the easiest way to do something, or because it's the way that it's always been done. You need to constantly be thinking, how can I do this simpler? How can I make this process simpler? How can I do this for cheaper? How can I do it in a way that makes it easier for the long run and helps accomplish that long-term goal without having to go the path that's always taken? So always kind of be thinking about, hey, you know what? Normally you have to, go through path A to go to path B because there's a bush in your way or something. Well, the scrappy way would just be to get a pair of scissors, cut your way through the bush and just keep going through. So a very simple way to be able to kind of think outside the box and get to where you're going to without necessarily using the methods that are traditionally used and at the expense that they come with. The third skill set is creative problem solving. So again, this goes back to what's traditionally taken versus going into the R&D route and being innovative and creative in your thought process. So I challenge you in your daily careers, in your the problems that you face every day, even in this hackathon, think outside the box. If you have a problem that's standing in your way, you have this obstacle that's in your way, think creatively. Don't get stuck in the box that you see because other people have solved this problem a certain way before. Think creatively about how you can solve it differently. Even if it may sound crazy a little bit, to tell you a secret, the craziest ideas are usually the smartest ones. So even if it sounds crazy, even if it sounds oversimplified, try it. I challenge you to go that route and to really attempt it and go outside the box and creatively problem solve anything that you can in your life, from the smallest to the biggest in your personal and in your professional life. Lastly, project ownership. This is a big one. So I think a lot of us, especially coming in from, whatever educational backgrounds you have, coming in from school, we're taught that you're given a task and your job is to accomplish that task. However, I would say going into your careers and, continuing through school, an important skill to learn is to own the projects that you have. Sometimes it's not bad to be doing all the work in a group project. And the reason I say that is because that means you have to learn and practice all the skills that it takes in order to be able to complete those projects. So in your career, later on in life, or even in your personal life, I challenge you to be able to lead those projects from A to Z. So if you're designing a house, for example, and you're a civil engineer, for example, and your job is to design the land, to make it simplified, around the house, to design the utilities, to design the drainage, the grading, etc. Why stop there? Your project, your team's project is to build a house. So start at the very beginning. What do the blueprints look like? What do the as-built drawings say? How can you start at the very, very beginning? See the problems that you're trying to solve. Go through them detail into detail. and go through from beginning to end until that house is built and your responsibility is complete. You are not done with that project. Go all the way through. If your job is to build a house, then I suggest you pick up a hammer, pick up some wood, and start building that house. Project ownership is a big one because if you take responsibility for the projects that you are given, not just your minimal task, and you're able to look at a project from a larger scope, from that kind of top perspective, you're able to learn so much more about that problem. And in that process, you're able to add value to your position and to your team in order to help better solve the problem at hand and to get it through without a hitch. So again, I challenge you to own all the projects that you are involved in from A to Z. And now, going into my current position, I am a project manager at a company called Relativity Space that is based out here in California in the United States. If you don't know what the company is, our goal is to design, build, and launch 3D printed rockets in the world's first autonomous rocket factory. So obviously I'm very excited about this. One of the most exciting jobs I've ever had with the most exciting goals I've ever had. Launching 3D printed rockets sounds pretty complex. However, why 3D printed rockets? Well, we're looking at several different improvements that can shake the industry, including having much fewer parts, 100 times fewer parts, 10 times faster production time, a simpler supply chain. These are just some of the benefits to 3D printing rockets. And not just, it sounds amazing, right? It sounds really cool, and it is really cool. And to be able to contribute to a mission like that is really like a dream job. And that's what it is to me. So that is what I'm currently involved in. I'm the project manager of infrastructure and construction projects involved with the design and build of our autonomous factories, essentially. I did want to go into a little bit of what a rocket is, since I suspect not many of you have had the opportunity to learn about them. And I highly encourage you to go to our website if you want to learn more. This stuff excites me. So if it excites you, I encourage you to go online, go on Google, go on Wikipedia, whatever it is, learn about rockets. It's pretty exciting, at least it is to me, but I'm a pretty big nerd, so maybe that's why. Just to go through what a rocket is essentially, to give you an overview since I'm here. So on the right, you'll see this tall picture of our Terran 1 rocket. So I'll describe a few parts of it. So at the very bottom, you see the thrust structure. That is what contains all of our engines for the first stage. So that is pretty self-explanatory. But right above that is our first stage, right? So that whole portion is essentially the first part of the rocket that gets us into space. What a rocket is essentially a giant tank. So you have basically propellant domes that contain liquid oxygen and liquid natural gas that act as propellants to the engines that you see at the bottom that are able to propel the rocket essentially out of the Earth's atmosphere and into space. From there, you have the interstage, which connects the first stage to the second stage on top. What the second stage is essentially a smaller version of the first stage. The second stage, it also contains those two tanks, liquid oxygen, liquid natural gas, that are able to get you into the specific orbit that you need to get your satellite or whatever your payload is into. And so that brings me into the last part, which is the payload. So you see that fairing, which is on top, that little enclosure. Once you are at wherever the orbit is that you need to get into, that essentially opens up and releases the satellite into that orbit, and your mission is complete. So that's a basic overview of a rocket. Again, I highly encourage you to follow us on social media, go on our website, etc. if you're excited to learn more. The way that I got into this job is that being involved at the Boring Company, I was often interacting with people in the aerospace industry, people at SpaceX, people at Relativity, that were just excited about rockets. And I myself, since I was a kid, was excited about aerospace and was excited about rockets and really wanted to learn more and would watch launches all of the time with my family. And so with Relativity, I kind of seized an opportunity to be able to contribute to a mission that I was very passionate about. So that is how I got into this specific industry, which I know is going to be one of my greatest accomplishments, is helping us get into our first launch very, very soon. Now I want to get into the challenges. So I've kind of taken you through my career timeline. Now I want to go into the 3 big challenges that I have faced during my career path, and that I know some of my closest friends, family members have faced. And I wanted to kind of go into what they are, why they are what they are, and what I would recommend you to do, and the things that you should be thinking about along the way. The first being time management. So there are so many things that I could say about time management. I think everyone kind of tells you you need to have a healthy work-life balance, you need to manage your time wisely, you need to prioritize, etc. But what does that mean exactly? And like I said earlier, this is probably the most controversial thing that I'm going to tell you today, but you don't need as much of a work-life balance as people tell you, in my opinion. You create that line. I think work-life balance is that line is very arbitrary, and you have to be able to set your values and tell yourself what you want that line to be. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean completely overwork yourself and not rest at all. You need to be able to give your mind a break in order to maintain your mental health. But that doesn't mean that every time you feel tired and you've only worked 4 hours, which I feel all the time, by the way, after lunch, I always just want to knock out. That doesn't mean that you need to stop. It just means that you need to find the balance that's right for you. I think a mistake that a lot of people make is that they're scared to go outside of their comfort zone. They're used to the norms that are set by other people in their fields, and they go along with those norms. But the truth is, at the end of the day, you don't have the same values as everyone else, which goes to point number 6 on that slide. So some people value, for example, exercise a lot. And it's not because like, oh, I want to go to the gym today, it feels good, but it's because working out is what makes me feel good. That is a major goal of mine. That is a life accomplishment that I want to continue building. That is a major portion of my life, and therefore I'm going to dedicate time to it as much as I need to in order to accomplish that life goal. That being said, the time that you spend on exercising is going to be, in that case, a lot more than another person would spend if they were just doing it because, oh, I should work out, I don't feel healthy today, right? The same thing applies to your career goals. And I keep saying career goals, but it's really, what you're passionate about in terms of this field. So I'm only saying all of this because I think not enough people say it. But if you're really passionate about something, especially early on in your career, especially when you're in school, I can't say that enough, especially when you're in school, don't worry about the amount of time that you need to rest as much as you think it is. Go outside your comfort zone, do some extracurricular activities. And again, that doesn't mean hit the books 24/7. That doesn't mean study your mind off until you can't open your eyes anymore. But that means if you need to be involved in more extracurricular activities, if you need to join more clubs, that have people with similar aligned interests in terms of the career path that you want to go into, the industry that you want to get into, projects that interest you. Don't be afraid to join those. Even if it takes up a little bit more time out of your day, if it's something that interests you and it can really help develop your career, it can really help you connect with people in that industry, 100% go for it. So I can't stress that enough. Going back to the list that's on the slide, don't constrain yourself to singular goals. So like I said, I was in civil engineering at the beginning, and then I added mechanical engineering to my skill set. I didn't constrain my goals to just that of being in civil engineering. I also added goals related to mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering, which helped me a lot. Number 2, don't be afraid to push the limits of your time, which is what I just said. You don't just have to be an 8 to 5 person. 8 to 5, you go to work, fantastic. At 5 o'clock, do something else, learn something new, join an intellectual club of some sort, join a book club about a book, about an industry that you love, join a class, read books that maybe aren't fiction or nonfiction, but are genuinely textbooks or something. You know, add some goals that are abnormal to your timeline. Thirdly, is have a daily and weekly priority list and stick to it. So I think we all get kind of caught up in a sense of, you know, I'm overwhelmed, there's so much to do, I have so many goals, I have so many things that I have to finish by the end of day today, and I can't finish them. Well, guess what? That's okay. That's why you need to set a priority list and tell yourself realistically what you're able to do without burning out. Because you shouldn't be burning out. You should be putting in just as much time as you're comfortable while still giving your mind a break, while still being able to rest, and doing something that you love doing outside of work in order to give yourself a mental break. But in order to do that, you need to prioritize. So write down these goals, type them up, put them on a sticky note, have an agenda, have something, and stick to those priorities, and that'll help you a lot with your time management. Number 4, write down your short-term and long-term goals. So this is a big one. I would highly suggest writing them down somewhere, whether that's, you know, emailing it to yourself, texting it to yourself, again, writing it on a sticky note or on a napkin. Know what your goals are. What do you want to do? And that's both personal and professional. What is it that you wish to achieve? Do you want to win the Athena Hackathon? Do you want to learn a new skill? Do you want to get a specific job, get a specific position? Do you want to, you know, what are the accomplishments that you hope to have this year, in the next 3 months, in the next 5 years? What are those? Write those down so that you have, anytime you have the question in your mind of what I should be doing right now, you can look at that list of goals and say, what is going to get me closer to accomplishing those goals? Number 5, part of your time should be dedicated to learning new skills. So without growth, there isn't progress, in my opinion. So, and that doesn't have to mean taking a class every day. That doesn't have to mean watching a YouTube video every day. Sometimes you learn those skills just by experience, just in time, just at work. But you should dedicate your time to learning something new, whether that's once a month, once a week, whatever you're able to do, whatever you're comfortable with. Always strive towards progress. Always strive towards expanding your skill set. That'll add value to what you do, trust me. The last one we already kind of went over. Don't make the mistake of thinking everyone has the same values. Not everyone has the same priorities. Not everyone has the same goals. So if somebody else values a certain part of their life more than yours, it's okay. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that you need to kind of align your time and your goals separately, and that's okay. And now going into the second challenge, which is gender-based bias. So obviously, I'm a female in a male-dominated industry. Unfortunately, that's how it is currently in all of STEM fields, in most STEM fields, I should say, much like all of you. So just going into the engineering workforce, since that's what relates to me personally, in the year 2020, according to the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 13% of the engineering workforce is women, and 87% of the workforce is composed of men. That I do believe that number is growing steadily. I do see more and more women in the industry every single day. And I'm very proud to see all of you guys participating in this awesome event. There is a way in order to make sure that number continues growing at a healthy state. And there is a way to encourage others that are in the same boat as you are, and to ensure you don't give in to the gender-based bias that some people have. What I will say is not all gender-based bias is conscious. I think we all have biases. I think not all of them we know about, right? So I can't tell you how many times I walked into a meeting with a bunch of much older, much bigger male execs in my field, and I would be the only girl, or maybe one of two girls. And whenever they walked in, it was kind of like, "Oh, can you tell me where the water is?" Or "Do you have the meeting notes? You know, are you taking the meeting minutes, etc." So it was expected that I was taking kind of more of a secretarial role. Which is not what I was doing. I was actually about to be leading that meeting as the lead engineer in that meeting. So it was a very interesting experience. I didn't really take offense to it just because I was prepared for it. Going into it, I understood where it came from. I understood why it was, and I understood that I wanted to help progress towards a more healthy environment rather than go backwards. So what I realized was that I need to approach these problems logically and factually rather than emotionally. And the way that I faced all these problems was very head on. So in those meetings, when I would be asked those questions, I would point them to the water. I would give them the meeting notes. I would politely say, no, I'm not taking meeting minutes, but I believe that gentleman is, if you have any questions. And then I would start the meeting. I would introduce myself as a civil engineer, for example, or as the team captain, or as the chief engineer, and I would continue with my presentation. And I would often be faced with a shocked face in the beginning, which I found rather hilarious, to be honest with you. But I continued on with my presentation, and I showed them what I did, right? I showed them my skill set. And throughout that meeting, their attitude clearly changed. I was the one that they were directing all the questions to. I was the one that they had to ask to make the decisions. I was the lead in the room, right? So unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. What I will say is that it has already progressed. What I will say is that people are starting to adapt. The people that have been in this industry a long time are used to something specific. And it's up to us to show them that things have changed a little bit, and that it doesn't matter if you're male or female. If you're doing your job well, you're doing your job well. And there's a reason I don't introduce myself as a female civil mechanical aerospace engineer, right? I'm a civil mechanical aerospace engineer. That is what I do. That is what I'm good at. And that is what I'm going to continue to excel at and try to contribute to innovative missions with. Because calling it otherwise is really calling to a fact that we are different. And we shouldn't be creating those divides in a professional environment, in my opinion. I'm a woman. I don't see many women in my industry, but I have started to lately. And my job is to support those women in any way that I could. And one of the ways is to show that I am darn good at what I do. And it doesn't matter that I'm female. So that is kind of my 2 cents into that experience. My recommendation to you is to encourage others that you see going into this field, support them as they need. Know that unfortunately we do still go through those experiences of bias, and because of that, we need some support from each other. It happens to a lot of us, as unfortunate as it may be. And the only way to get through it is to show others what you're made of. Be good at what you do and make sure everyone knows about it. And support those around you who are going through the same thing. I think the main thing that hurts me the most is seeing young girls with this predisposed bias. I think one of the most shocking moments in my life was giving tours of the Boring Company, actually, to young girls in, I believe, middle school and then 9th grade and high school. And two of the girls in middle school asked me after I introduced myself, they're like, wait, did you say you're an engineer? And I said, yes, I am. And they said, girls can be engineers? I didn't know that. That really was just like a dagger to my heart. It's up to us to be able to support the young girls, the young women in this industry, and to help change that thought. That's the main thing that I think is driving the number that you see on the screen, is people have this predisposed thought that different genders have different jobs, and that's just not true. While we are, physically different, chemically different, psychologically different, our technical abilities do not differ for that reason. So please, if you ever have the opportunity to talk to young girls, to talk to young women, girls in your family, encourage them to pursue STEM, encourage them to pursue those fields that maybe not many girls are going into, and show them that it's a possibility and that there is success stories within those fields. And now lastly, is overcoming bad management, whether that's in your projects, in your career, in your school, etc. Here are some things that I've listed that have helped me get through bad management in previous jobs, whether I love those jobs or not. This is always something that comes through. You're always going to butt heads with somebody. So there are several ways to approach that to make sure you overcome it in a healthy manner. Number one, ask many questions, and not just to your direct manager. If you have a question that you are not able to find an answer to, so that means you've used the available resources to you, you've looked it up online, you've used the books that you needed to use, and you were able to find that answer, ask questions. If you are curious about something else, about another team in your company, if you're interested in learning what they're doing and it's completely unrelated to your job, ask those questions. Get answers to what you're trying to learn, and help kind of learn the dynamic of other people at your company that will help you relate to teams and in your workforce. Number two, if you're not adding value, you are not valuable. This is a huge one. You need to always look for ways to add value to what you're doing. So that means that if you are just doing your job and just doing the tasks that you're asked to complete, are you really adding value? I would argue no. I would argue that you're easily replaceable, right? A technical skill set is easily learnable. If somebody else can learn what you do in a reasonable amount of time, I would say you're easily replaceable. So I would encourage you to add value, challenge the status quo, see how you can adapt your goals, see how you can reach them faster than expected, exceed those expectations. Third, measure situations factually, not emotionally. So this is a big one for me. I'm a very passionate person, right? But I had to learn to measure situations factually. I knew that in order to receive the response that I wanted from other people, I wanted to show them factually how these situations were negatively or positively impacting others, and not approach it in a emotional manner. So if me and my boss were arguing, were disagreeing, whatever, I had to approach it factually and say, hey, these are my ideas. This is the format that I'm putting it in. This 1, 2, 3 is how it will improve our project immensely. And 1, 2, 3 of your ideas is how I believe are going to negatively impact this project, and this is why. So again, measure factually, don't go into it emotionally. You can vent at a later time. I have my own friends that I vent to. I hope you have yours as well. Fourth is, if your values don't align, it may be time to look elsewhere. So I do find a lot of people kind of get stuck of, this is the only job that I'm ever going to have. This is the only job that I kind of feel comfortable in. So I'm set in it. I'm not going to go outside of it. And this is where I would stop you and say, if you're not happy, if your values are not the same as your management's, if they're vastly different and you're not able to reach that kind of center point, I would encourage you to start looking for another job or find another team where your values do align. But don't get stuck somewhere just because you're comfortable. Lastly, ask for constant feedback. So there's a lot of teams that I hear about, especially from my friends, where they're in jobs where they don't really talk to their manager in terms of getting feedback. They say, once a year they do reviews and they hear bad feedback, but they're not able to add to it because it's already been a year that they've been doing something wrong. So I would encourage you to ask your manager, ask your peers, etc., for constant feedback. Hey, how do you think this presentation went? How do you think I did in this project? Did I affect it positively? Did I affect it negatively? How did it go? So that can go a long way, and I encourage you to pursue that in your careers as well. Lastly, looking forward, I want you to not only look at how you can accomplish your goals. I want you to look at how you can exceed the goals and exceed the expectations that not only that people set for you, but that you set for yourself. And I do that in 3 different ways. These are the 3 things that I go by for my personal and my professional goals, actually. Number 1 is take responsibility. So I take responsibility for my projects. I take responsibility for my team. If something went wrong, it's my responsibility. And it's my responsibility to go back, see why it went wrong, and make sure it does not happen again. Even if it was my team member's fault, it is not my team member's fault because I should have showed them how to properly do it, right? So take responsibility for your team's actions, take responsibility for your actions, take responsibility for your project, and really take it all the way. Once you start doing that, you learn to look at the fine details in everything that you do, and you can help it move along much more smoothly. Number 2, be curious. Learn about everything you could possibly can. Don't just get stuck in what you're specifically doing. I think a lot of people just have that tunnel vision. Open up your horizons and just learn about everything you can. The last one, be hungry. Be hungry to accomplish more. Be hungry for higher goals. Be hungry to learn. That is, I think, what has set me apart from most of my peers, is that I'm so hungry to learn about everything that I'm passionate about, even if I know absolutely nothing about it. And that has really helped kind of skyrocket me into the field that I want to go into. And lastly, the note that I want to leave you with is what I tell myself every day, which is create yourself. I kind of sprinkled thoughts in throughout this entire presentation. Progress equals happiness. If you're not progressing, I don't think you're going to feel happy. I think us as humans have this innate thought process where whenever we see progress, we feel happy, whether that's in fitness, whether that's in a relationship, and whether that's in your job. Continue progressing, continue learning new skills, continue getting better, continue growing, and you will feel happy. That is what true happiness is in my eyes. And always think to yourself to create yourself. You create your own circumstances in life. You create your own opportunities. If something isn't handed to you, guess what? It's going to take you a little bit longer than somebody else, but you can definitely still create your own opportunities. Don't let anyone say you can't change the world. You're the only person. Because guess what? I strongly, strongly believe that you can. You just have to create your own opportunities to do so. I hope that you guys were able to learn something valuable today, and I hope that I was able to help some of you to guide you along some of the expectations and experiences that you were going to have during your amazing career paths. That concludes my presentation today. So Alex, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over back to you.
Yeah, and a big thank you for everyone listening. A massive thank you to you, Arwa. I think the note I just want to leave it on is one that Nyasha in the comments has said, super inspiring. And I think that's kind of the perfect way to end it, because I think that's exactly what it was. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate you guys being here today, and good luck on the rest of the hack.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That is